personal for me, but really important. I'm really flattered that Miss has asked me to be with you. So I'm not going to talk forever. I'm just going to do a few things to introduce what I want to say to you, which I hope are in line with this idea of the craft of writing. And I've got a little bit to sort of that I brought along to indicate a bit about what this writing stuff's all about. Many of you won't have realised that I've had something published, because no, I'm not a famous author, that's pretty clear. But I'm really heartened that recently I have been able to get some things published, and I have something else coming out later this year, which I'll talk to you about as well. So first of all, the thing I've got here is a poem I wrote, and I've done quite a few exhibitions of visual poetry, and I sort of got interested. This is quite a few years ago now, but I just brought that along, and I've got another one that's in Japanese that I did to show you a bit about the different sort of aspects of how you can write and how you can present things, right? So I'll talk about that maybe a bit later. But the things in the box, it says the craft of writing, but I think it's more like the hard work of writing if you want to do something to a level that you're really proud of, all right? Not necessarily to a level that gets you published. That's the little book called The Water Cart. 2 versions in the library, which can be accessed at any time, which I can talk about. But to get that, I'll try to organise these things. There's different drafts of different things. I'll talk about that in a minute. Oh, there's another copy of the book. So I brought there are a few drafts, right, of the thing called The Water Cart, the little book, right? Now, we are so lucky now because we're really lucky now because I still write, this is my current little notebook for any ideas and stuff to, I don't forget and work on and stuff. And it's really nice working on paper because when you change things, your original idea is still there, unless you cross it out so you can't read it anymore. And I think that's a nice way to work. I sometimes... this was a gift to me a few years ago, and I sometimes use the whole page to actually start writing out major things. And the thing I'm working on at the moment, if I go camping or somewhere totally offline, without a phone, sometimes I write like this, and I've got quite a few pages of that nibbling away, and I still love that idea of the pen and the paper, and not just because it's a tactile thing and everything, but also because when you change it, unlike on a computer or any other device, it's still there, right? You can still go back and you've got the history of what you've done, and that's kind of a nice way to work. The thing I mostly use now though is this, because the Notes app, I have so much stuff on Notes that I've got an idea, so it's so easy, just write an idea down, and then when I do get on my laptop, it's just transfer straight across, I copy it in, and so there's lots of ways to work. But any way you cut it, however you create it, I get to the stage where I want to make a draft, and I print it out, and then I go through it and re-look at it, and then I might show it to someone else, usually not. I just usually put it away, maybe send it to a publisher, they send back a letter saying you're dreaming, and then I go again, and that you end up having so they're all drafts of the same thing, and I had the very pleasant letter a couple of years ago saying I did want to publish it. So that's that book, and then I've got a few other ones in here. Well, that's another visual poem for you. And this is one I'm working on now called Dear Yukie, which is it's the same format of 7-line stanzas, which is what I just, for whatever reason, feel comfortable writing in. But it's all in a letter format. So the whole thing, it's a guy writing to Yukie, which is a girl, and you're only getting his version of the correspondence. But that's what I'm working on at the moment. Oh no, This is going to be
There's a
published.
third one. Oh.
Sorry. This is another part of that one still left. Another one called Leopard Wood. This is the thing coming out in sometime after October. And this, one thing you can do, I paid to have something published, like printed. I got 12 copies, I think, printed, so that I could easily show it to a few people and give me feedback on it. So that's what. But the actual thing will probably end up looking something like that later in the year. And with that, I've got these dramatic effects. See, I thought I'd bring this out. And these are all to do with what will end up being about like that. And before that, this thing started as a poem called something totally different, Puppet, and it started as a poem. So with that one, it was going to be a really long poem. And then I thought, no, I'll write it as prose. And I did that, and that's why I published this. And it didn't work for me. Other people said, oh, it's a good story, but I ended up going back and I rewrote it all in verse form. So that's why it's taken quite a long time.
Wow.
So that's a bit about the craft of it. I've been sort of fiddling around with writing things out and making sense of the world through writing it out since I was in about year 10, and just have always, it's been my way of, I call it my sense making. It's a mental health thing for me. It's like if I am particularly grumpy and ask any of my family members, just not as happy as I could be, it's usually because I haven't sat down and tried to put pen to paper for a while. That's just me, right? That's what it is. So that's for show and tell. I can talk about any of the process of any of the things.
Well, we do have some pre-prepared questions in an order. Oh, yeah, can we?
Yeah.
Okay, we do
What
that.
are the steps in getting published?
I'm still working that out. The steps that I went through, because I published something while I was at uni in Newcastle years and years ago, and the University of Newcastle published a little collection of my poems, which was great. I thought, oh, this publishing thing's easy. I'm still at uni, and then I got more and more interested in not writing novels or anything, but writing poems. And the usual way that you can make a living out of that with verse is that people often go into the music industry, or I don't know. That's kind of the best way, I suppose. But I thought I'll do more and more stories and started writing prose, but the stories and so forth, you can have a journey of just getting a profile about all that, but I haven't done that. I became much more interested and consumed with education, and that's been a joy, but the writing thing just kept for me being something that really made me feel good, and I just wanted to keep getting better and better at it. So the thing that worked for me with this was the idea that I really felt that this particular story would work best as a verse novel, and so I just wasn't going to publish it in any other way. And it's a case of finding the right publisher for the right type of thing you want to produce, because any publisher will have their type of books they want to produce. Some is children's books or whatever. Most websites say do not send youth fiction or poetry. So, yeah, but I finally found this mob called Gin and Dera. They're Canberra-based originally, now in South Australia. Sent it to them, and they wanted a hard copy, not a digital. I thought it's interesting. And then they sent us a very simple letter back saying, "Thank you." Yes, I said. But they're not a big mob. They're a great reputed publishing company, but they haven't got a big production house. They haven't got a big publicity machine, which is not my forte either, which I've got to work on. So it's a case of being dogged. Just sending stuff. I've got lots of no thank you letters, but that's okay. But the point is, I don't think you should write anything and think that the publishing is a success. I think the success is feeling that it's as good as you want it to be. And there's no doubt, though, that if it's a creative thing, I think there's this thing called the creative loop, where whether it's music, any performing arts or anything creative, if you're doing something, the full loop is when you actually get in front of an audience and you get feedback on it, and that's really cool. So if you write something and no one ever sees it, there's a bit of, some people are happy with that, and there's lots of things I've written which I don't care if no one ever sees. But if there's something you think you want people to see and you don't get an audience, that's a bit of a disappointment. So just keep on doing it.
Awesome. Next question.
What advice would you give to someone who's writing or who's planning to write something?
Just do it, because there's a lot of things, a lot of ideas I have, and that I haven't enacted, and that's kind of a disappointment. It's a case of, if you want to do it, you just got to be confident. I've been blown away by positive feedback, and the thing that heartened me, I've been lucky different times in my life. I've been lucky people gave me really positive feedback on something, a poem or something, and I thought, oh, I'll keep doing this. And so when I was at uni, I had a thing published, and I thought, oh, and then I was probably in my early 30s, and I had an exhibition of poems in Newcastle, and I made $1,000.
Oh, cool.
I'll never forget that. Yeah, after costs, from people buying poems. And one time it struck me, this guy walked in, it was a big thing, it was a poem on timber, really about 12-foot long thing, a poem, and I'd painted it, and this guy walked in and he bought it. You know. And I thought, this guy knows nothing about me. I was sitting there, looking after the exhibition, and I thought, wow, that connected with someone. So you have anything like that says, yeah, there's something in this, so I should keep doing this. So, but you don't have those experiences unless you do it. And the other experience was, I've had really wonderful feedback from this, and unexpected support from some really high-profile people about it. It's been really lovely. And that just gives you a bit of heart to keep doing the next thing. So, but it's work, like anything. And you can't think, oh, it's okay, I'll put it away. I fill the page up. It's good. It's a bit like that old cliche about when you're doing a painting. It's not finished when you filled up all the white bits. That's the start. You got to build it up. You got to really work on it. And that can be a trudge. You think, but then there's something. You know yourself when it's done. So with your work in school, you've got time frames you might have heard about, right? You've got things coming up, you've got time frames. And you've got to work within that. But if it's something, and you do your best within that, but if it's something that's open-ended because it's something you want to do and you want to communicate, well, the quality's on you. I don't think it's right to endlessly be working on something, because I could pick this up and read it now and I want to change something. Guaranteed. But I sort of drew a line under it and said, no. Nah. And then when someone else was willing to publish it, I said, yeah, it must be good to go.
Yeah, well, that's one of the beauties of it, I think. When you look at it, and it's a remnant of the past that's still kind of captured.
Yeah.
You can look back at it and see how you evolved.
Great comment. And I think, I'll tell you the other thing that happens, I read this and I think, who wrote this? I don't recall, It's a bit magical. You think, this is not bad, I think, So it's kind of weird like that. But it's because it's a bit of time's elapsed, and then that's right, it's there, it's sort of complete.
Immortalized.
Oh, immortal, that's a big word.
Okay, next question.
Did you have a clear vision of what ideas you wanted to convey? If not, at what point did these arise?
Great question. You got good questions in this class, mate. No, the funny thing is you don't. I had a great experience a couple of years ago. I was asked to be part of the Bellingen Readers and Writers Festival a couple of years ago, and meeting and talking with other people who are writing. The difference in how people do things is quite astounding. Some people have a clear, this is how it's going to start, this is the body of the whole work, and this is how it's going to finish. I have an idea that something could lead to a really good story, and it's when you're doing it that it goes all sorts of places. And some of the challenge is keeping it as simple as possible. The thing with me is, because I started, and poetry's been such an interesting thing for me, is that poetry's all about paring things down all the time, making it the most elegant, I suppose, or basic, spare way of communicating something. So I've kind of got that discipline, I think, and so I don't want any complications. It's always making it simpler and simpler. With the watercart, the story came from and this was in my pitch, my synopsis to the publisher. The thing that happened, I used to teach many years ago, in the early 2000s in Wilcannia in Far West, in New South Wales. And one day we took our Year 7 8 students to a day health centre. And we listened to stories from the elders there about their life when they were young people. And they were terrific. And the typical stories were, you young people don't know how lucky you've got it, because when we were kids, you know, rah, rah. And one of the elderly ladies said that when she was a child, and if you know anything about that part of the world, it's semi-arid, remote area of far western New South Wales on the Darling River, the Parker. Her life for quite a long time was taking a water cart, a horse and cart, with a water tank on the back of it, from Wilcannia to White Cliffs, which is 90 kilometres. And now it's a 90 kilometre, lovely drive on Sealed Road. But then it was a week each way camping, and I thought, wow, what a hard experience. So I just thought I just wanted to write a poem about that, and I did. And then I thought there's a way of talking about so many things about Australia in that story. So I worked out she would have been probably a young girl in the 1940s or 30s, but then the story would have been more interesting, I reckon, if I pushed it back to the turn of the century, when that part of the world was a really interesting, dynamic, multicultural kind of place, when the steamships were going and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, I'll write it from her perspective, but there was no way I was going to write a story from the perspective of a young Aboriginal girl. And I changed it around to be from the perspective of an older man looking back, non-Aboriginal person looking back on his life. And I wrote it, so it's all in 7-line stanzas. I'll hand them around and have a look.
So I have a question that relates to that now. How did you decide on your form of verse? How did you get down to the 7-line thing that you... I mean, it's not. It's a weird, odd number. It's not like a sonnet of 14 lines. It's not a quatrain. A quintrain. What's that called? A 5-line. Anyway. What do you call a 7-line one?
I don't know.
Not sure.
It doesn't matter. It's a half sonnet, so it's either sun or a net.
So how did you settle on the 7-line?
As with T's question, it's you don't know until you start. And so my poems would usually be about a page, and then they got a bit longer, and longer and longer. I thought to get someone's attention and keep someone's attention for more than a couple of pages, you've really got to have not just a great story going or some puzzle or whatever, but you've got to have a beat and a pulse to it, I reckon. Yeah. Now, the whole, the iambic pentameter, the whole Shakespearean thing, and many different authors, I used to think, they're really conscious of doing that as you're writing. I don't know how I'd ever do that. So my stuff has always been, and nearly always, not with rhyme. And sometimes I say I get ambushed by rhyme sometimes because something works and there's a bit of rhyme in it. That's all good. But there's nothing that rhymes regularly. So I think if it's brief and if I can have 7 lines, for whatever reason, gives me chance. It's like a decent sized paragraph, right? In one way for me to think about it. And it also gives me a discipline and it gives it a pulse. So there's no punctuation in it either, because I decided to cancel that, because the punctuation is the pauses is just the line. So the line's like a breath, really. And then the stanzas are just a regular beat to it. And sometimes some passages I reckon flow really well, others I think, gee, this is still a bit clunky, and then you got to go back to it. But I think it just helps the reader by having the regularity and the beat to it. and it helps me by making me more disciplined. Because if I have to think about getting something into 7 lines, sometimes it's easy, it just fits, but other times it just makes me think, what am I trying to say? If I can't get it to work, is it really worth saying, So that's why I've stuck to it. And I just naturally, the more I do it, the more natural it is for me to do that now. And it's just, I don't know, I think I can sit down and write prose, of course, and stuff, but it doesn't float my boat. It really does. This is how I like to. It's become much more a natural thing for me to do now. Yeah.
I'm just looking at this sort of randomly now. I just noticed that you've got some of the stanzas are italicized and some lines are in italics, and some aren't.
So what I did for this book,
What was the point?
the italicized is instead of having any direct speech, anything in italics is someone's speaking.
Okay.
That's it.
So you just create a convention.
Yeah, and Peter Carey did that with the True Life of the Kelly Gang.
Okay. I don't remember that. I've got that in my bookshop. I should go
Pretty
look.
sure that's what he did. Yeah.
All right, I think we've got another. Oh, William?
Yeah.
So you've tried experimenting with prose previously,
Yeah.
but it wasn't your cup of tea. You
No.
don't enjoy writing in it.
I do, but I think probably because I did so much poetry stuff for years, that's just more what my interest is, And as I said, this story, I went and wrote the whole thing after doing most of it in poetry, wrote the whole thing back in prose, and thought, nah, and went back again. And it just ended up being different drafts of it, I suppose. But I think it gives it a discipline and I don't know, I think some people might look at it and say, no way I'm going to sit down and read that much poetry. But if they start, it's not hard. It's just I think it's more about creating a thing that's easier to read. I hope, like it's a beat to it. It's an easier thing.
I think there's another question there.
Yep. In what ways does your book describe the world, evoke emotion, shape a perspective, or share a vision? And what was your intention at the beginning of your writing process? So did it match what you got?
Yeah, cool. Well, answer the second part of that maybe first. I didn't know what the end of it would be. I did, because it does, and that sounds a bit, corny or superficial to say, but it's true. Like I knew there'd be I felt there was something of worth to dig into, but I wasn't exactly sure how it would conclude. But I'm happy with how it did. I ended up thinking, well, what are the themes going to be? How many rabbit holes are you going to expect people to go down here? Because it's very easy to let it get more and more complicated. There's more and more characters you want to introduce, and you've just got to keep paring it back a little bit. As far as what I wanted, I felt, as I started saying before, from the initial idea of what an actual person experienced, the hardships in her young life, to what I thought would be the most powerful way of telling the story, it changed quite a bit. And so it changed to a different point in time for Australia. So my hope is, because it collides with Federation, the lead up to so the old man's remembering his life as a young boy with a friend of the girl who in the years leading up to Federation, so coming up to 1901. And I'm interested in history being sort of evoked through individual people's experiences, right? And I think that point in time in Australia, there's so many awful things happening in Australia at that time, but there were so many things also to be proud of. And it was a point in time where we were starting, because Federation was all about all the colonies coming together, right? That's when we first became the whole nation. But it was also in the thick of White Australia policies, the beginning of all that, it being explicit about that. But in somewhere like Wilcannia, you had Barkindji Aboriginal people, the rich culture of that being devastated. You had the all different levels of European society living in a harsh environment, and you also had this idea that a new country was being formed, and how good is that going to be? You had people with the Camileys, many Muslim people in Australia and that part of the world. You had Chinese people with the opal fields and different things there. It was a fascinating place, multicultural place. But also, and I was thinking, well, which way should this country go? And hopefully people can see, well, we've still got those problems. You know, we've got this history, we've got these opportunities. So I don't know. I can't tell people what they should think after it. But I suppose I want it to be a provocation for things I think we need to talk about. That's it. You know, I can't write about Aboriginal Australia because I'm not an Aboriginal person. But I can talk about how that impacts me as a non-Aboriginal person. And what I did in this, I have many friends in Wilcannia. I visited them and made it all acceptable and supportive of them, because there's a man and a woman in the book called Jack and Hannah Quayle, who are real people and whose grandchildren or great-grandchildren I taught. And they are extraordinary Aboriginal people so their families I liaised with about it. So there's a lot of learning, a lot of history and stuff I learnt in trying to work out the yarn I wanted to tell. And that's been a wonderful thing.
You've established a very Australian atmosphere. How do you think that was achieved?
Oh, just brilliance, really. Everyone's still awake. That's good. No, I don't know. I think you've got to be mindful of the environment you're creating. Like the first few words or passages in it are about, you know, setting the scene. You're setting the scene with the environment and the characters. For me, it's an environment I love and then a landscape and place that I really am fond of. And so I think you need to know the environment and the landscape really well to achieve that. I'm having interesting... I think you've got to be aware of... Yeah, be confident in what the images you're trying to portray, but don't be satisfied with your first crack at it, because you know there's lots of versions of it. So to go back and see if you really are overcooking it, you know, because you've got to leave a lot for the imagination, but you have to give enough, I reckon, images for people to evoke something that they're picturing. No.
I think you did capture the vernacular really well.
Okay.
With the characters' dialogue.
Oh, thank you.
I thought that was done very well.
Yeah. Well, that's just...
You can hear their voices.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Australian voices.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, and that's just, I don't know how it's going to go, but I just try. There's no formula really. It's like, is this going to work or not? And keep nibbling away at it.
Yeah, so in the editing stage, what was most difficult? How long do you think it took you to edit the book?
See, what I do, and I don't know what other people do, because I have a full-time job. You might have picked up I've got a job, which I love, but that takes a lot of time. And I don't pretend to spend every weekend or holiday doing this. It's just however long it takes. The thing that was very helpful finishing this is that I broke my leg. That was very helpful because that gave me 3 weeks away from school. I fell off a motorbike and broke my legs. That was good. It wasn't good, but it gave me a chunk of time.
The silver lining.
away from work commitments to actually focus on it. So you've got to be able to focus for periods of time. But this take years. Like I was in Wilcannia, I would have heard the story in probably 2001 or 2. And then a few years later, I started working on it, and then probably wasn't until... I think the motorbike episode was 2015, and then which really made me. I felt like I've broken the back of this. I really have. I'd written the skeleton of the whole thing, and then it just nibbled away. And it was 2018 2017. I got the publishers saying they'd do it, and then the next year they published it. So just for time with publishers, for example, the same publisher they agreed to do Leopardwood, and they told me at the end of last year that they'd be happy to publish it. It wouldn't be before October 2021. So that's sort of the time frames.
So was that 2 years of editing? Did I pick that correctly?
Well, it's hard to say because I sort of put it down and sort of let it marinate for a period of time, or life takes over and I can't do more, and come back to it with, because you do that, you come back with fresh eyes. You say, this is crap. This is, this part was better than I thought, and then, so that's helpful too. I think if you say, I've got to, you're not a journalist, like you don't have to have it in by the deadline, you just keep going until you think it's right.
So if you write it like that, and then you come back with fresh eyes over a period of time, you can continue doing it for your whole life, right?
Yep, totally, you can. You
so
could.
When do you choose the time to stop doing that? And when do you say, yes, this is a finished product and we're done?
When your English teacher tells you. No, seriously.
And then ask for an extension.
And then ask for extension, yes. No, for me, it's a great question, because I don't think there's a magical answer to that. But for me with this, I thought, that's cooked. I'm done. Part of it was I'm dead sick of it. I can't do any more on that. But that's also part of the thinking. Yeah, this is as good as I can make it. But the feedback's been great. So I think I made the right decision there.
I think too, part of the process for you, Mal, might have been from the 2001 or 2002 story. It was all percolating.
Yeah.
In your mind and your heart all that time. So there's all those years and years and years of that.
Yeah, totally.
Until you actually start writing it as well.
Yes, and this thing, Leopardwood, I started writing that way before this. And that was a poem. I had an exhibition in Newcastle in '97. When were you guys born? And this is a poem in that, and that changed into this thing called Puppet, and then so that's, you could say it's taken 30 years to write something, but then again, I could, I suppose, technically break the other leg and get 6 months off and work on a totally new thing and finish it. Like if it was a I shouldn't say that, because this weekend I'll be going. He said he just wants to write something. He says, so if you have a block of time, happy days, I reckon, because if you've got the self-discipline to sit and do it, because there's a definite connection with this and this. You have to be actually doing things. You have to focus and get things happening.
I think Tim Winton used to say he would go to his desk every single day, even if he didn't feel like writing, and just sit there and wait until. And
that's the great thing of it. You don't know. I don't think it's if you feel that. And look, I think it's understandable to think someone who writes something or creates something, they've got it all in their head and they just go bang. But it's not. It's a process. It's a creative process that you have to be actually happy to take whatever steps. And some steps will be embarrassing, and some steps will be, the wrong steps. But the good thing is you're doing it. I feel good because I'm doing it.
It's like a journey.
It is, totally. Absolutely. Yeah.
Another question there?
Yeah, so can you please extrapolate on how you got structure, voice, setting, and use of recurring motifs into your book? How do you do that?
Don't know.
Can you talk about the cards?
The card, oh yeah.
What was the furphy?
The furphy, yeah. Well, I can. That's maybe a good way to answer it, because things like an image or a motif or something you might not realise it's going to become a motif until you keep doing something. So the cart this is talking about, it is a water cart, it is a practical thing, but the water cart in Australia and that part of the world was used for many purposes. Obviously before other infrastructure was in place for water and stuff. But the water cart, the Furphy is the brand of the company in Victoria who made these things. And in World War One, which is after the water cart was set, they were the water carts that were used in the World War One battlefields to take water to the soldiers in different parts of the battlefields. And if you heard of the phrase, it was a furphy. It's a lie. It's a made up thing.
Oh, yeah.
So that came from people going to the water cart and hearing a story which wasn't quite the truth, right? So it became a
sort of gossip,
gossip sort of thing. So
exaggerations.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So that. What am I trying to say? That the coincidence of that is the book. there's a book published around the same time as this, as the water cart, or set around the same time as the water cart, by a guy called Joseph Furphy, who is called.
It's a famous book.
It's a famous book.
I've forgotten as well.
Yes, who was the brother of the same company. So all these connections come about. As far as the cart, the image from me in the water cart, it's part of the. It's an image of a journey. Like it's a symbol of the ardor of the journey, but it also became used for different purposes within as the story evolved. So I don't think I've answered your question anywhere lucidly at all. But I think if you think you're going to have an understanding of what all the motives are going to be right through the story, you're dreaming. Because you'll start with something that you think, oh, this is a good way of telling this part of the story, and then something else will come up, or there'll be a link to something else, and you'll keep going like that. That's what I think. Anyway.
Could you identify any other texts that may have provided inspiration or stimulus for your writing? If not, what was your inspiration? Cool.
Such is Life is the name of that. Is that book we were trying to remember? That was one.
Right.
Yeah, look, as far as verse novel goes, there are not heaps and heaps of them that I'm really into, but I think it's a really nice, concise way of conveying a story. One of the biggest impact stories I had when I was young was American author Jack Kerouac, On the Road, which was like the Beat generation and post-World War II. And it's not like this, but it was in prose, but the action just went lightning pace, and it was like it had a pulse to it. And you just had to keep reading, and I'm interested in. I think that had a big impact on me. The thing that I'm interested in through this is how pieces of history or actual people, which I mentioned before, can be kind of stepping stones of reality, of real things in the kind of pool of the fiction that you're writing. So I think we can learn. I'm interested in that. How a story which just makes you think about something. Like I wanted to have it as a bit of a provocation for things. Not everything's real in it, obviously, but there are some things that actually happen. There are some actual places that are still there, and people are still living lives in remote areas. But I think if we can learn a bit of history through story, knowing that some of it's true, that's a great interest to me. Yeah. There's no end of stories that can be inspiring to people, and me too. But I'm not the biggest, widest reader in the world. I gotta tell you, I read mostly non-fiction stuff and poetry stuff. A lot of other stuff I just don't get to now. But yeah, I don't know.
But there's that beautiful friendship of the two children in your story, the Aboriginal girl and the non-Aboriginal boy, who sort of grow up together. That's, to me, really quite symbolic of reconciliation and just moving forward with that.
Oh yeah, and the whole idea that even then, even in the turn of the century, there were great friendships between people. That's true, that's real. It's not something, there are awful events as well. And so yeah, there are important connections and types of people and relationships people have that hopefully they just provoke some kind of discussion. Because I'm interested in not just an entertainment. I'm interested in things that no one has to believe anything I write. Why would they bother thinking what Malcolm John McFarlane wants to put in the page? Who gives a toss? But if it's something that's engaging enough for people to read, I think, oh, that's all right. Well, that's cool, and that's why it's heartening to me.
I think we've got one more. Is that right? One more question.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your book? For instance, plot, main idea, themes, form, and purpose.
I think that was meant to be the first question.
But no, look, I have done that. What I'll do is tell you about the next thing coming up. If that's all right. And it's a totally different. It's set now, but it's in the same part of the world. And so what's interesting to me now is writing about the same. We've got the same challenges. Like, how are we as people in our country? You know, I can't write a book about America. I could, but it wouldn't be genuine. You know, so I'm interested in how we are together as people, and this is set in a particular point in time, but it was the same thing. How are we together? How are we going to be in Australia? And at the moment, the thing is evolving to be about climate. How are we with the environment? You know, dare I say it? The aspect of it now is how are we with global pandemics and that whole thing. So I think for me, it's, as I said at the beginning, it's a way for me to just sit and reflect and think about. You know, it's a sense-making process for me. And I think if the beauty of story, whether it's film or song or any creative art or any connection, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's good for you to do it because I think it makes you reflect and think. And if you've got the discipline to refine something and edit or whatever, that's really something to be proud of too. But and whether someone connects with it or not, it doesn't matter. But if someone does, and that creates a bit of a discussion, well, hey, I'm proud of that. That's good. That's you know, keeping us thinking and maybe making better decisions. That's my hope. You know, I haven't made much money out of it. It's hardly any money, but it's ideas about it. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite authors?
Apart from Jack Kerouac, I mean, he's not a favourite, but that one book was important, I think. Not particularly, you know. There's a lot of authors who my favourite writer at the moment is someone you may know, Tasman Keith. He's a performer. He's a yeah. Have you heard of Tasman Keith? Well, check out Taz Keith. Okay, he's my favourite writer. He's a performer. Okay, current because he's current, former student. Disclaimer.
What about somebody more classical?
Well, classical. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you can say you can't go past Shakespeare.
I was whispering that.
Let's give Miss McFarlane a clap.